So many people expected the pandemic would lead to a baby boom when in fact it led to a baby bust. Until 2020, the birth rate had been declining about 2% a year, but according to the CDC, that rate dropped to 4% during the pandemic. 1 in 8 families now struggle with infertility, and studies show that miscarriages in women are increasing by about 1% each year. That's why in this edition of Startups with Sanaz, we're speaking to a San Francisco-based startup called Alife. It's a company that wants to use artificial intelligence to increase fertility outcomes. Joining us now is Alife's founder and CEO, Paxton Mader-York. Paxton, thanks so much for joining us today.
Great to be here, Sanaz. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Now, as time goes on, we're seeing more and more people marry later and start a family later in life. So assisted reproduction is becoming more and more common. But unfortunately, it's still a very expensive and emotionally taxing process. What role does Alife Health play in all of that?
Yeah, so IVF is a complex series of steps. And as you mentioned, about 1 in 8 couples today suffer from infertility. That number is only going to grow in our lifetime as people start families later and more people seek out these services. One of the big challenges to IVF care is providing the optimal treatment from start to finish, from the initial discussion around should IVF be the right course of treatment, all the way until you have a successful child. Each step along the way should really be personalized to that patient. And that's exactly what Alife Health and artificial intelligence can bring to the table. Artificial intelligence is really just computer-based pattern recognition. And so we can build a data set that is massive across all the states in the country and all the prior historical cases, and then use artificial intelligence to find correlations between those patients and the successful outcomes. We can then turn those algorithms into recommendations so that your physician can make the optimal recommendations and personalize their treatment portfolio for you in your case.
Okay, so because I was just going to say, I mean, obviously there's a doctor involved because you want personalized treatment, but then also looking to other people for your treatment doesn't necessarily sound personalized, but really it's providing somewhat of a blueprint or a guideline for your fertility doctor to follow based on patterns that you display compared to, say, patterns that similar patients display, right?
Exactly. So it's looking at similarities between your case and your embryos to all the historical cases and picking up on those patterns so that we can make really, really strong recommendations and build tools to help clinicians deliver the optimal care for that patient and increase the efficacy and hopefully over time increase the affordability of these treatments.
And that was going to be my next question. I personally know that I went in to get eggs frozen, and I was shocked at the sticker price of one cycle. I believe it was close to about $15,000, and the doctor said that if they don't get a certain number of eggs in that one cycle, you'd have to go in. I would have to go in for another cycle, so potentially, double or triple that price, depending on a woman's ability to produce the desired number of eggs to be frozen. Lower income communities, there are people in all communities, but lower income communities are also, at risk of not being able to access these kind of, procedures and facilities and just care. What does Alife Health what is it looking to do, the company looking to do to be able to provide these kind of services to people who may not be able to afford them otherwise?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, the affordability and the cost here is astronomical, right? $15,000, sometimes $20,000 per a single cycle. An average of 3 cycles to have a successful pregnancy can really add up over time. And although we're specifically building technologies at Alife to optimize those treatment pathways and improve the number of eggs that you get out in a single, retrieval cycle, it's still very, very expensive. So our goal is to improve the efficacy of each one of those cycles meaningfully so that over time, the average cycle decreases from 3 cycles down to 2 or even 1, thus reducing the cost and burden. Relative to the access for minorities or underrepresented groups, historically, we've unfortunately seen a lack of representation of those groups in research and in clinical care. And so one of the wonderful things about what we're able to do at Alife and use our artificial intelligence and the massive data set we have is that we really focus on inclusion and diversity in our data aggregation. And so we have representative cases from all sorts of different demographics that correlate with the current demographics of the country. And so for the first time, we're able to pull out insights from that data and actually tailor those treatments specifically to that minority group and that specific patient.
And so, as you mentioned, IVF and fertility and assisted family planning, it's all very, very complex. It's obviously all backed by science. Everybody's physical body is different. With Alife Health, you guys are using artificial intelligence and data to kind of streamline the process. Is it going to be allowing for more successful outcomes? Let's say, I want to go in and I want in vitro. At the end of the day, whether the egg attaches or not is dependent on my body's ability to do so. How does the data and the artificial intelligence kind of play into guarantee, or if not guarantee, increase the success rate in a process like that?
Well, that's the hope, is to improve the overall success rates for each of these cycles and for a given patient. One of the things that we work on is embryo prioritization, just looking at the embryos and trying to predict whether or not they're going to implant and result in a healthy pregnancy. It's one of the things that we're really focused on now. And if you can pick that embryo first to transfer better, you can reduce time to pregnancy and in some cases improve the chances for success. We are also building products that try to optimize the number of healthy eggs that come out of a mother. And that in and of itself increases kind of the top of the funnel and increases the number of embryos you may have and thus the chances for a successful outcome in IVF as well. So we believe that really optimizing and tailoring your treatment at each step throughout the process is really the key to improving clinical success rates in an area where it's been very difficult to do so over the last 20 years or so. And that's something that AI and machine learning and large data sets and collaboration and partnerships and scientific research, all things that we're doing at Alife really enable. And then it's about bringing all that know-how and those kind of recommendations and delivering them back to the clinicians and patients in a digestible and meaningful way. So we're really focused on not just a single step of the process. We really want to optimize every step of your process, and through that strategy, get compounding improvements to ultimately achieve what you just mentioned, which is an actual, real successful improvement overall for each patient.
I know so many of my own friends that have gone through the process of in vitro, and just watching them, it's emotional because they want to have a baby, but it's also emotional because they're just being pumped with hormones. So I know it's a very emotional process, but being able to have a resource like this, access to a company like this that, takes the steps, as you say, kind of personalizes it step by step to increase their chances of the outcome that they want. I'm sure it's music to so many women's ears, but Paxton, as we all know, having a baby is a two-way street. It's not just the women. There have been reports that there has been a decline in sperm production in men, and that apparently we're on course for an infertile world by the year 2045, which is a terrifying thought to think about. How does Alife plan on combating that, or is that something that's kind of in the future?
So it's a very real problem, and there are other companies out there also working on this. But one of the specific things that we're uniquely positioned to work on is the analysis of the specific male genetic material that's utilized in the process. And so in a very similar manner that we can analyze the embryo, which obviously has both parts of the system combined already and fertilized, or just the eggs coming out of the mother, or just the sperm coming out of the father, we can create analysis tools to try to pick out those that are going to have the highest chance of successful pregnancy, and then give those tools back to the clinicians who are often working under a microscope and can make more informed decisions as to which genetic material to combine, ultimately creating these embryos. So it's certainly something that we think a lot about and are working on solutions for to try to assist in that side of the equation as well.
Now, I know as a startup, a startup is always in the funding stage and trying to find more money, but where is Alife in terms of helping families that are trying to conceive now. Have you partnered with doctors? Have there been any, I guess, success stories that you could tell us about?
So we have partnerships with 7 of the largest clinics, and we've got close to 30 members of all clinicians and doctors on our clinical advisory board. We are just finishing up development on our first product. The second product is underway. So although we're not announcing the exact time of launch, please keep your ears open for our technology out at a clinic nearby you, kind of in the next year or so. And we're very excited and encouraged by the early results that we've seen and the progress that we've made so quickly on this problem.
All right, and if patients or women or couples want to kind of learn more about what Alife has done or plans to do, where would they get that information?
Yeah, anyone is welcome to go to our website, alifehealth.com. You can sign up for a mailing list where we'll keep you apprised of our developments. You can also follow us on Instagram or Twitter. It's at AlifeIVF. Please keep in touch with us. Getting information and working with patients is so critical to us developing the right technologies that ultimately provide great improvements to care. So we would really appreciate your support and your help. So please join us on those platforms and help us bring this technology to benefit others.
All right. Well, Paxton Mader-York, Alife's founder and CEO, I'm sure I can thank you on behalf of all the women out there for what you and your company are doing. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.